1904, 1905, 1908, 1910, 1912, 1913, 1918, 1924, 1925, 1928, 1933.
The great American road belongs to Buick.
The remote system offers the ultimate in keyless entry convenience. While still some distance from the car, the user can unlock the doors, turn on the interior lights, and unlock the trunk. Now I'm going to show you how the remote keyless entry system works and how to program it. I'll also outline some basic troubleshooting techniques. Let's start by looking at the hardware that makes up the system. The main components are the remote transmitters and the receiver module. The electronics are pretty sophisticated. Still, the transmitters are small enough to double as keychain holders. There are two styles. Black, square-shaped transmitters are supplied with the Electra Park Avenue and Regal models. Riviera and Riviera come with a pair of gray-colored transmitters. Besides the appearance of the transmitters, there are also some electronic differences between the systems. But in use, the operation of both is fairly similar. Functions are controlled by pressing the touchpad-type switches on the transmitters. There's a switch for opening the trunk. On either transmitter, when the unlock switch is pressed once, the driver's door unlocks. When the same switch is pressed a second time, the passenger door or doors are also unlocked. Pretty handy, huh? The operating range of the transmitter is roughly 30 feet. Pressing the lock switch locks all the doors. Of course, the regular power door locks and the remote trunk release can still be operated using the switches on the car. On Electra Park Avenue models, pressing the unlock switch also activates the illuminated entry system. This turns on the courtesy lights in the car and at the door lock cylinders. To unlock the passenger doors, the unlock switch is pressed a second time within 5 seconds. The Riviera and Riviera transmitters operate the same way, except to unlock the passenger door, the unlock switch is held down or pressed a second time within 1.5 seconds. There's also a separate switch for the interior lights. This permits turning on the inside lights without locking the doors. Oh yeah, and one other thing. On cars equipped with factory theft deterrent systems, pressing the lock and unlock switches automatically arms and disarms the system. Well, that's what the keyless entry system does. Now let's use some video magic to look at how. As I mentioned earlier, there are some differences in the electronics of the two systems, but the overall operation is similar. When any switch on a transmitter is pressed, a UHF radio signal is generated. The radio signal is made up of a number of separate pieces of information in the form of computer binary codes. In both systems, the first part of the signal wakes up the receiver module in the car so it can begin processing the rest of the data being transmitted. Another important part of the signal is the vehicle access code. This code provides security for the vehicle since the receiver does not operate the locks without a valid code. Each keychain transmitter is programmed with a specific vehicle access frequency code, which cannot be changed. The Riviera and Riviera transmitters are programmed with a 20-bit code. The Electra Park Avenue and Regal system uses a 32-bit code. In either case, the number of possible individual code combinations is enormous. The receiver in the car has a memory that must be programmed to match the vehicle access code in the transmitter. When the receiver has processed the transmitter signal and determined which command switch was pressed, it then activates the appropriate circuitry for that command. The Electra Park Avenue and Regal transmitter operates on two DL2016 type batteries. The Riviera and Riviera transmitter uses a single-size 2025 type battery. In both cases, batteries last approximately 2 years, And changing batteries doesn't affect the program code. The receiver in the car can store up to 2 vehicle access codes in memory. So, 2 transmitters, each with a unique access code, can be used on the same car. Also, any number of cars can be programmed to unlock using the same transmitter or pair of transmitters. Fortunately, disconnecting electrical power to the vehicle does not erase transmitter codes already stored in the receiver memory. However, when a transmitter is lost or broken, the receiver can be reprogrammed to operate with 1 or 2 new transmitters. If 2 transmitters are used, the receiver must be reprogrammed for both of them, even if only one is new. That's because previously stored transmitter codes are erased during the reprogramming operation. So let's look at how the programming is done. Don't forget to check to see that the batteries are properly installed. You'll also need a suitable jumper wire. For Electric Park Avenue, a jumper with 2 of these type of connectors works best. For the Riviera and Riata, you'll want this connector on one end of the jumper and a spring clip on the other. Before starting the programming procedure or any other diagnostic work on keyless entry systems, it's always a good idea to open the driver's window. Otherwise, there's a risk of getting locked out of the car. And that can be a little embarrassing. The programming procedure for Electric Park Avenue and Regal is slightly different than the procedure for Riviera and Riata. So to avoid confusion, we'll cover the 2 systems separately. And since I'm right here, I'll start with the Park Avenue. Electric Park Avenue and Regal are programmed with the ignition key off. In the Park Avenue and Electra, the programming connector is located here, behind the glove box. The connector in the Park Avenue is a 2-terminal type connector. The terminal with the black and yellow wire is, in fact, the ground. So the system is grounded by jumping the 2 terminals. When the programming connector is grounded, the door locks lock and unlock once within 2 seconds. This signals that the system is ready to be programmed. At this point, the program memory in the receiver is cleared of any previously stored codes. With the ground connected, press any button on the transmitter 1 time only. The locks cycle once again to signal that the receiver is programmed for this transmitter. If only 1 transmitter is used, stop here and disconnect the jumper. If the jumper is disconnected before the second transmitter is matched, or if any switch on the first transmitter is pressed more than once, then the receiver records only the code for the first transmitter. Make a mistake, disconnect the jumper, and start over. To program for 2 transmitters, leave the jumper wire connected and press any switch on the second transmitter once. Again, the locks cycle within 2 seconds to signal that the transmitter code is received. The receiver is now programmed for both transmitters. All that remains is to disconnect the jumper wire and check that the system responds properly to both transmitters. The Regal system is programmed exactly the same way. The only difference is that the programming connector is located in the trunk. It's behind the side carpet on the passenger side. Use the jumper wire to connect the program plug to the ground screw for the radio antenna. The procedure is the same as for the Park Avenue. Now let's look at the programming procedure for Riviera and Riata. The Riviera programming connector is located in the trunk, beneath the rear window shelf. The Riata programming connector is behind the trunk carpet on the left side. Riviera and Riata are programmed with the ignition switch on. Once again, a jumper wire is used to connect the programming connector to ground. And the doors lock and unlock once when the connector is grounded. However, there are 2 important differences between programming the Riviera-Riata system and the Electric Park Avenue and Regal systems. First of all, on the Riviera-Riata system, the full programming procedure must be completed within 30 seconds of connecting the programming connector to ground. If for any reason the procedure is not completed within 30 seconds, disconnect the jumper wire and start over again from the beginning. Here's the other difference. After the jumper is connected and the door locks have cycled, the unlock switch on the transmitter must be pressed twice, pausing for 1 second between presses. Next, wait 2 seconds for the door locks to cycle again. Then, repeat the procedure for the second transmitter, pressing the unlock switch twice and pausing for 1 second between presses. The door locks cycle once more to signal that a second transmitter code has been received. After they do, remove the ground from the green connector and check to be sure that the system is operating properly. So that's the programming procedure. Pretty straightforward, but it is important to remember the difference between the systems. There are detailed troubleshooting procedures as well as wiring diagrams for the remote keyless entry system in the know-how reference manual included with this program. But right now, I'll run through some preliminary checks that should be made before performing system diagnosis. Now, the thing to keep in mind when troubleshooting is that you're eliminating possibilities. For example, let's say we have a situation where the door or trunk locks don't respond to the transmitter. You press the buttons, and nothing happens. Aside from any really obvious problems, at this point, there are 4 possibilities to consider. First, the problem could be in the power door lock system. Next, there's the transmitter itself. The problem could also be in the keyless entry system wiring, or lastly, the receiver module could be faulty. So the first and easiest check is to see if the door locks operate properly from the switches on the car. If the switches on the car work okay, then we can eliminate the door locks as the source of the problem. If locks don't function from the switches, check the fuses. If fuses aren't the problem, refer to Power Lock Diagnosis in the electrical section of the appropriate service manual. But if door locks function normally, the next step is to check and see if the transmitter is okay. If the car is programmed for 2 transmitters and both are available, try the second transmitter and see if it works. If the second transmitter works, the fault is with the first transmitter. If that's the case, install new batteries and try it again. If it still doesn't work, replace the transmitter. If the locks don't respond to the second transmitter, or if no second transmitter is available, the next step is to ground the programming connector as when programming the system. If the door locks cycle when the connector is grounded, then a faulty transmitter is still a possibility. So obtain a known good transmitter and use it to program the system. If the good transmitter operates the locks, replace the original transmitter. If door locks don't cycle when the programming connector is grounded, then the fault is in either the receiver module or in the system wiring. You don't want to replace a good module, so check the wiring first by performing a pin test at the harness connectors. To get to the receiver module on the Park Avenue, remove the defogger grill and the instrument panel trim pad. The Electropark Avenue module has 2 8-pin connectors. To perform the pin test, unplug the connectors from the receiver module. Then check for power and ground between the individual terminal pins. For example, on the Electropark Avenue module, pin A carries battery voltage at all times, while terminal H is a ground. Pin B is the output to the trunk release solenoid. So when a jumper is attached between pin B and battery voltage at pin A, the trunk release should be activated. By continuing in this manner, the operation of each circuit can be tested. On Regal, the receiver module is under the high-mounted stoplight. It uses a single 8-pin connector that can be tested the same way. The connector on the Riviera and Riata receiver module is a 32-pin CD connector similar to the ECM connector, except that it's blue. And again, the circuits are checked the same way by jumpering between the pins. You'll find pin diagrams of each type of connector in the know-how manual. One other check to make on Riviera and Riata is the receiver antenna. On Electropark Avenue and Regal systems, the receiver antenna is contained inside the module. On Riviera and Riata, the antenna is on the back glass, above the defogger grid. A coaxial cable joins the antenna to the module. If the transmitter works when held close to the receiver, but not at a distance, check the antenna and the coax cable for continuity. By systematically working through each circuit, you should be able to isolate the problem pretty quickly. You know, the remote keyless entry system is a good example of current trends in consumer electronics. It offers the kind of extra convenience that Buick owners have come to expect in their automobiles. And as technology becomes more and more sophisticated, we're sure to see more equipment of this kind in future Buick models.